Good morning. I'm Claudia Lash, and today I'm working on the Presto Avenue Designs newsletter quilt block for September. I thought you might like to follow along. If you are working along on the newsletter quilt, today or September's block is the last block part of the pattern. So once you finish your September block, you can make some doubles up of other blocks that we've had along the way, but then in October, November, December, we're going to just mainly do the finishing up. We're going to be putting sashing on and borders. So this is coming towards the end. Now this month, last month, we did this block, which is a saw blade star. And the one that's in the quilt looks different, but this is the extra one that I made. This month we're doing another saw blade star, which is a variation. This is variation 1, this is variation 2. This variation of the saw blade star has corners with foundation paper piecing. You can see these 4 corners. And since foundation paper piecing is such a valuable skill to have, I thought it would be good to have it in one of our blocks. Now, many people already know how to do foundation paper piecing, and that's fine. If you know how to do it with regular paper, then in the pattern on my website, which you can download free this year, is a pattern for each of these 4 corners. When I show you the block today, I'm going to be doing foundation paper piecing with freezer paper because that's the way I prefer to do it, and I think it's easier. But you can do it whichever way you like best. So I hope you enjoy watching and following along, maybe learning something, and if you have any questions as I go through this, be sure and comment or send me a little note to let me know what you need more help with. All right, I have my pieces all cut out and ready to follow directions and make, first of all, the half square blocks that go right here. The ones that go on the sides, on the 4 sides. They're very easy and we've done them a lot before. This may be a repeat for many of you, but I always draw a line from corner to corner with a pencil and usually a ruler. I've already drawn a line here. And then I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away from the line on this side and a 1/4 inch away on this side. I have my black and this time my star is going to be in orange. So I have my orange and the black right sides together, and I'm ready to take it over to the machine and sew my 1/4 inch seam. I am doing the 1/4 inch seam away from this line that I've drawn, and I've done one, and then I thought maybe I would show you how I line up my pieces. If you want your piecing to be accurate, you really need to watch your 1/4 inch seam. And here's a little tiny mark that I go by. And I also look at this side of my foot, not the back of it, but this front side. So I'm going to feed this in so that this edge is coming along this line. And I'm also watching behind the needle. There's another mark, which is the 1/4 inch seam. Okay, we have our squares sewn and pressed, and now we're going to trim them. These are a little tiny bit big, not a lot, but enough that if we trim them, they will be exactly 3.5 inches on each side. So I lay a square ruler on top with the diagonal line right along that seam line, and I make sure that there's 3.5 inches on each side. Now, as I look at this, there's not too much extra over here, maybe just a little dog ear. But that's okay, I've got 3.5, so I'm gonna trim that, and I'm gonna trim the top. And then I'm gonna flip this around and lay the diagonal line on the seam line. Check 3.5, 3.5, and look, there's very little to trim. But as long as you have exactly 3.5, you're set. I'm going to repeat and do the same thing on these other half squares. I have set aside the half square blocks because I don't need those right now. We're ready to do the foundation paper pieced corners. And I do have another video on this also on my website, which you can check out. But I thought I would show you on this block because it's just such an easy way to do it. Before you start, you need to have some sort of a heavy card is what I use. You need to have a cutter. I like to use these 1/4 rulers because they have this nice lip here which butts against the seam. And also you need your paper pieces. So on my paper pieces, on my freezer paper pieces, I mark the numbers that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to start with number 1. I've already cut out all of the pieces I need. These are the number 1s, these are number 2s, these are number 3s. Whoops, which you cannot see probably. 1, 2, 3, and then piece number 4 is a big triangle. So I am going to go to the ironing board, and I am going to place number 1, the fabric. Now this is a batik, so it's a little harder to tell, but this is the back side of number 1, and I'm going to put my paper onto there so it's covering all the edges. And then I don't know if you can see through this paper, but there is I've got about 1/4 inch. That doesn't really matter as much as making sure that this point is covered and all these edges are within your little number 1 light piece. So I'm going to go and press these down with the iron. Okay, I'm at the ironing board and I have pressed the first one, and I'm going to show you the next one. Remember, you're putting the back side of the fabric down. And luckily on the batik it's very easy. I'm going to lay this piece so that it's got all edges covered, and I'm going to press with the dry iron. And then the next one, the nice thing about, this is what's nice about freezer paper. And if it comes up later, it's very easy to press back down. All right, now I brought those pieces from the ironing board, and I'm going to use the heavy card, lay it on the line, and with my hand, I'm going to press this back. Now that, to me, that looks close enough to 1/4 inch. I am not going to trim it. I'm going to put the next color, number 2, on. And again, this time I'm using batiks, so that makes it easy. I'm going to put it in the middle because I see it's got to cover this edge and this edge. So I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew right down here, right along where I'm not going to sew on the freezer paper. I'm sewing right next to the freezer paper. All right, I'm at the sewing machine. I have my foot down and he's right next to the paper. I also turned my sewing machine's length, the stitch length, down a little bit from the default. It's at 2.0, but it's not down as tight as you would do it if you were going to tear the paper out. So I'm going to stitch just right next to this edge of the freezer paper. It's right along the edge, very close, but not on the freezer paper. And then I'm going to feed another one in just the same way. Now that I've brought these from the sewing machine, and I am going to fold my paper back, flip them over, and fold the fabric back. This is number 2 that we're folding back. And then I usually use my fingernail or a finger just to finger press it down. Then I will take it to the ironing board and iron it with a dry iron. But the finger pressing seems to help, and oftentimes this freezer paper will come a little bit, it might come loose. Well, you can very easily just repress it down. Let's take it and fabric side first, and then I take it and press it on the paper side. Okay, here's the one that I just pressed. Put my card, and luckily it has my name on it in case I forget who I am. I'm going to fold this paper back, and so you can see I've used this before. This is when I use this nice little out-of-quarter ruler. I stick it right up against the paper and trim at the edge of the ruler. That gives me a 1/4 inch seam. And then I am ready to add number 3. And again, I'm going to lay it in the middle so that both corners are going to be covered when it's flipped over. And I'm going to go sew it on the sewing machine. I'm coming to the last piece that I need to put on. I have put on my 3 oranges, or I've added the 3 orange fabrics, and now it's time for the black edges. So I have the black rectangles are over here, already cut, plenty big, and I'm going to lay them on once again. This time we always want the new fabric to be face up and right side up. Lay this in the middle so that these are covered, and I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew from here right along here down to the edge. I have my 4 pieces all pieced together. My foundation paper pieces pieced together, but they're too big. And this is how big they're supposed to be, where the paper is. So now it's very easy to lay my ruler, my square ruler down, and trim the edges. on each side. I'm having trouble seeing where the paper is versus my mat here. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on all of them. And when you have them trimmed to the right side, then you can peel the paper off. And when you're peeling paper off, it's always easiest to go from the number 1 spot to the other side. It just peels off a whole lot easier, and then you can use these. It peels off really easy. You just need to get a little finger in there, fingernail or something. Look how easy that was. Just peel that right back, and this guy is ready to piece into the block. And this paper can be used another time. It can be used, I've used them up to 6 or 8 times. Once you have those 4 done, these are going on the corners. So use your diagram that's in the pattern. Lay your lightest piece in the middle. Your half square triangles are going to go, I think, like this. And like this, and like this. And then you can follow the directions. Basically, you're going to sew them into rows. These 3 into rows, these into a row, these into a row, and then sew the rows together. And in the pattern, there are directions for the way I pressed. You can, of course, do it any way you like. One more thing. When I sewed these together, as I was sewing them together, this seam was going to be a problem meeting up if it was sticking back like this side. So I just flipped him this way and found that he works much better. Then these seams are pressed in, which is a little different. These pressed out. And that way, when you fold this one over, you can nicely line them up. And I lined the seams up, and then I put a pin just to the right of the seam. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. If you put a pin just to the right of the seam, they should nest together nicely. I often will also put a pin at the end just so he doesn't get pushed out of shape. And here's another one where it seems like it will fit better if I press this guy in. And so I'm going to press him in and sew, and then it should be okay right there. So we'll sew this seam, and then we'll add the last one, and we'll be done. I'm adding the very last, row. I usually do not press with the iron until I have all 3 rows together, at least on this. It's better to finger press, and then when you're all done, you can press with the iron. Okay, I've sewn all 3 rows together, and I pressed kind of the way the block wanted to go. It's okay to press them open, or just the way the seams seem to want to lay. Now he's all done. He should measure 9.5 by 9.5 and ready to go into the quilt. This will be the last block. So if you want to make doubles of any of the blocks that we've had so far, this would be the time.